Here's a question for all SMB owners. Could you step away from your business for the next 12 months and have it continually running as smoothly and as effectively as if you were there every day? Now, that's just one topic we covered with our guest today, Ray Everest. Hello everyone, it's Rob here from the Better SMB Podcast. We have an amazing guest in this episode where we cover leadership, we cover innovation, how to scale a business, and just being humble all the way through that journey. Ray is a fountain of energy. His lessons he has learned are great insights for all SMB owners. We really look forward to hearing your feedback on this episode, but before you carry on and listen to what Ray has got to say, please hit the like button, share the episode, share the whole podcast with your friends and your colleagues. That way you can support our journey in making SMBs around New Zealand an awesome place to do business. Anyway, that's enough for me. On with the episode.
Welcome back to the Better SMB, where we're on a mission to lift New Zealand's productivity by helping small and medium business leaders take practical steps to improve their business performance, starting today. I'm David Altena.
And I'm Rob Bull.
We've created this platform to spark a movement. Our BHAG is to get 100,000 businesses, that includes 15,000 manufacturers, on a journey of continuous improvement. Through the podcast, our monthly column, The Last Word, a New Zealand manufacturer, and our growing community, we're building a trusted voice for SMB leaders, offering the inspiration, insight, and implementation support they need to build high-performing, future-ready businesses. Our guest today I met over a lunch beer and had the privilege of introducing him at a recent Priority One Talent Forum. We were both talking about the subject of productivity, but from different perspectives. For me, I was coming at it from a macro view, one where New Zealand has to move from being an exporter of things we grow to one of things that we know, moving from the world of primary industries to that of high-value knowledge and service exports. But what was amazing was that I could introduce someone who's doing exactly what I talked about at a conceptual level. He's taken a traditional brick and mortar business, combined with some innovation, and is now creating a knowledge product that's on the verge of some significant opportunities, both nationally and internationally. But we'll get to that. His LinkedIn profile headline says he's a husband and daddy, ambitious innovator, focused on deep societal impact, leadership potential spotter, and Warriors fan. Welcome to the Better SMB, Ray Everest.
Yeah, thank you, David. Yeah, what an intro. It was cool walking in and you just saying, I need a beer. And I thought, 5 o'clock somewhere. So that was us, eh? It was nice and easy. But no, I really appreciate the opportunity, fellas. Good to meet you as well, Rob.
I've been a bit vague intentionally about why we've got you on. So what I'd like you to do is start at the end. Tell us a little bit about now to give our listeners an idea of what you've managed to create. Well, probably what you've helped support your wife to create, but before we get into this, and how it's all come about. So tell us about what you and Courtney have created in little old Papamoa.
Yeah, so at present we have 6 early learning centres. Future Focus is the name, and we've been going, this is into our 7th year now, so we've basically done one a year. We've got 550 licences across Papamoa, and in pretty close proximity. That was certainly a very clear decision we made. 120 plus staff, wicked back team. And as of this year, we have a CEO now. Ashley has taken the reins from us. Is really looking at taking it to the next level. I'm really fortunate with Courtney that she's come in with a real strong business background and HR background, and I've come from education, and it's just been the perfect kind of amalgamation of skills.
So you mentioned education. How did you get started on this journey? Because I know you didn't just go, yeah, let's just jump into early childhood. You've got a little bit of a journey that you've been on. Tell us a bit about that.
Basically, I had my son, I was 16, my son Cortez was born, and it was at that point I realised I had to do something with my life. I was fortunate to get a scholarship to head to St Paul's Collegiate. I'm originally from Tokoroa, went to St Paul's, and it's really, I saw the difference in having really high quality teachers as an aggregate. There's just an aggregate hire of really high quality teachers that were able to put their arm around my shoulder when I needed it, or give me a rocket when I needed it. And they really strengthened my desire to go in and deliver impact, and becoming a teacher was the pathway. I had to get to university by getting 3 C's. And ended up I achieved that. Well, I actually did better than that, but I got what I needed to get into uni, and was the first to go to uni. But I quickly realised, actually, in my first year of teacher training, I actually realised the reason why teachers are held back is actually leadership. I remember turning up to, I won't name the school, but the principal was just way absent. He just wasn't connecting with the staff, and it was very kind of evident that he held some sort of hierarchy way over the top of people. And that was really an early insight into, hey, actually the reason why teachers don't do well is because they've got bad leaders. So I set a goal pretty early. I'm going to be school principal as quick as I could. So it took me 3.5 years. Yeah, became principal at 26. I was actually the youngest principal in the country at the time, out of a small school in Te Ako, out of Ngāruawahia, about 80 kids. And it's kind of, all we've achieved has always been about like creating bigger impact. And my kind of logic was like, be a teacher, 30 kids, become principal, times that amount of teachers, X amount of kids. And then it was like, go bigger principalship. That's kind of what my thinking was. And then create more environments for people to have impact, and create those situations for our teachers to really win. But the only downside was that I hated that job. It was a terrible job. So fast forward, yeah, we'd been living in the Middle East, and we'd investigated getting into business, and then we just found the perfect blend. We started researching kind of 2012. Opened our first centre though in 2019, so good 7-year window there, with a few other things involved in there. But basically, that's where we are today, built on, like I said, an amalgamation of skills between my wife and I, and some solid mentors around us. And yeah, we've managed to navigate through all those sorts of things to where we are today.
I'm just going to jump in on this couple of things on that one, Ray, because education and certainly leadership's very close to my passion, mainly through my partner Kate, who was a school leader and also a cross-school leader, and then doing consulting through the different funding streams. So a little bit of a political question, really. I don't disagree with you. I think education leadership, it's average at best, and I'm going to really poke that bear on that one out there nationally. So what's your take with the current government's direction around moving away from supporting leadership development? Because overnight they took away all the funding that went into supporting all of that leadership development. Because if it wasn't curriculum, if it wasn't reading, writing, maths, it just didn't happen. And I just think that there's a massive opportunity. I guess tweak what you just said is looking at some of that below the bar leadership that's out there.
Yeah, I think the first thing I have to say to that is leadership's a behaviour, and we don't get funded for our leadership spaces. We've taken a very active approach to really digging in and prioritising that, understanding that without great leaders, we can't have great environments that suit great people to win. That's certainly quite evident in my journey, and I've worked with some amazing principals, don't get me wrong. Ian Taylor at Manawatu Intermediate is probably the best principal I've ever worked for, as well as Tony Gray. But they've got some very tough, like take Ian's situation, like part of Rewa, the social problems that he is dealing with are just like the scale you can't even comprehend a lot of that stuff that's gone on, and every day, and it's made him ill. I'll say that too. It has made him very ill. But what I know about Ian is he's very good at placing people in powerful positions that will continue to influence, and he pulls that energy into them, which allows him to do what he's very good at, which is actually run the school incredibly. And So I think like when we go back and dig in and say like leadership is a behavior, we can make choices every week to really reinforce some of the great leadership models that are at the forefront. And I'll be honest, I don't look at a lot of education ones. I think we get into an echo chamber around education. I look at other leaders in other realms that have done great things, built great big businesses, not necessarily always profitable, for charity or for social good, but just the way that people carry themselves, how people can access those leaders, and ultimately, does that leader inspire them to go out and either be a leader themselves or continue to really do great things in the classroom or whatever that setting is?
Yeah, it's good. You look outside. You look at the whole leadership in the widest possible context, and that's probably one of my little dreams one day or wishes that education would look out into what they can learn outside of that sector. But also, as you said, I know some amazing principals out there just with my connections in the educational sector, and I could name them. You're the youngest principal at one stage. I know one of the youngest female principal in the country, right? And she's smashing it. So I think this podcast is for SMBs, but I think educational leaders and SMB owners can also just pick up what you've just said and sort of think about that and apply it in their leadership journey. So awesome.
Tell us about the move from teaching into early childhood and getting going. The first centre, cast your mind back. What was your vision? What were some of those challenges that you hit? And tell us about the first few big ones.
The first major challenge was my ego. I thought I knew about education. I just lumped early learning into the same kitty, and I got into a few arguments with some of our initial staff who are still there. Britt and I, man, we had some arguments. It was also though off the back of our gym that we had. We actually had a stint at owning a CrossFit gym, which I learned some very powerful lessons, but ultimately just wasn't successful financially. So it taught me some other great lessons, but I'd come off the back of that not doing very well. I'd had a go at a tech startup, which didn't do well. And so I was desperate to make this work, and my ego certainly got in the way. So that's the first one, when I realized actually you need to sit down and shut up. You don't know everything about early learning. And I had some very sharp learning there. The other thing was where I am being really serious is I always told myself I wasn't good with numbers. And I used to say, I'll leave it to Courtney, and my thing's education and leadership's thing, and actually it's bullshit. It was just hiding my fear. And ultimately I had to really dig into that and understanding my P&L and what that looked like and the expenditures, and so I basically went through a mini MBA, just trying to really understand what the P&L looked like, and not find excuses to not understand those sorts of elements. And I think the other major one to really talk to was, you get to a point and you think, oh man, like, are we doing the right thing? And I remember experiencing this as a teacher. You kind of think, I remember when you first start teaching, you're kind of like, man, these kids, like 6 weeks in, you're like, man, these kids are learning nothing from me. What the fuck's going on? Like, I'm just an imposter here. And you go through that window where you're thinking, oh, there's not enough enrollments or things like that. But ultimately, what I carried out from my educational career was I'm really great with people. It's certainly an asset of mine. Like, I'm able to create a situation where people feel like they can tell me what they want to tell me, good and bad. I've had to work hard on that continually. So as the owner, that people will actually front up and say what they want to say. But massively, the teaching career, what it did teach me is those interpersonal skills of dealing with people's most prized possessions, being their children, and having the ability to be straight up and honest with them while still maintaining a really strong relationship. And ultimately, that's really helped our presence in Papamoa, because Courtney and I are very approachable within the community.
Why early learning, and how has Te Whariki, or New Zealand's early childhood curriculum, shaped your approach?
Yeah, that's a cool story. You see, I had never heard of Te Whāriki until I was in Doha. We were living over
Awesome.
in Qatar. We were living over in Qatar, and I met a really amazing woman called Mary Sinclair, who was a cognition consultant, and they were running what they call the national schools, which is for the full local schools for Qatari kids. They were actually rolling out Te Whāriki in their equivalent of kindy into those spaces to give them a framework and building a framework off what Te Whāriki was and then fleshing it out in an Arabic way. It was actually quite unreal. And I remember reading this document and going, how come I don't know about this? And I was like, what the hell? I've been in education, 8 years. I'm like, why have I never seen this? It's such a beautiful curriculum. And when I got a chance to talk to Mary and the team from Cognition and what they were doing and how Cognition was actually rolling it out around different places around the world, I thought, well, straight off, we're dealing with a global product here. And there hasn't been a huge amount of change to what it is, because really it's about social and emotional competency. Can we help children feel socially, can we grow them socially and grow them emotionally so that when they turn up to school, they actually just believe they're good learners? It was such an eye-opener and an inflection point for me. And that was where we really started looking. And I thought, man, is this where we should be? And then there was a lot of stuff. I don't know if you heard of James Heckman. He'd come out in the early 2000s. Basically, he was an economist who studied early learning situations, and his research was pretty unequivocal about for every dollar spent in early learning is going to put about $7 back into society later on down the line. And it was all those things that kind of just stumped up. The opportunity to own land and buildings was important to us too, so giving a bit more foundation for the business. And yeah, it was just, there was a whole kind of myriad of information that we were able to pull together and realize. But remember, it took us a while. We started researching in 2012. We bought our first piece of land in Papamoa kind of end of 2016, and we didn't open a centre, and it wasn't that piece of land. We didn't open a centre until 2019. So, it took us a while to press play, but that's because we waited. I think, quite frankly, it's because we waited, we were patient, and the right opportunity presented itself, and we were ready to go when the opportunity presented itself.
So that leads me to being curious about some of those early decisions that have set you up for success and scale, rather than being just another early childhood centre.
Yeah. yeah. That was what everyone was saying when we opened. People were like, what are you doing? It's just another early learning centre. There's about 58 million of them in Papamoa. What's going on? There's a few things. There's a book called Blue Ocean Strategy. It's a brilliant book, and it gives you a bit of a framework to go through. And so basically a red ocean is where everyone's competing, and the blue oceans are where there is no one adding any sort of attention or energy into space. So we kind of went through that process. Right, everyone's doing daycares. Yep, cool. There's lots of them around here. Sweet. There's major competitors, including Best Start and New Shoots, who are national groups. And we thought, right, what is it we can do really well? So what can we do? What becomes a blue ocean? And we sat down and we said the first thing was there's no consistent storytelling. So that was the first thing. So social media and storytelling. We were really clear. We had a lot of clarity that we were for teachers first. And we had to tell great stories about teachers doing great things. It's very hard to draw attention to the great things that are going on when there's no presence online anywhere. So it was just me at the start, or Courtney or someone, and we'd just go on Instagram and film some stuff and kind of cut it all together. But we were really consistent. Every single day we just kept doing it. And what we noticed, the pattern was with other centres, they would spike. Their social media would spike, and then it would just drop off, and then it would spike, and then it would drop off. And we were wondering what was going on. Well, what we figured out was they were going for enrollments, so it would spike. They'd get the enrollments, so drop right off, and drop off for months, and then all of a sudden spike, and then drop off, where we committed to telling stories pretty regularly. So that was one thing the Blue Ocean really, really brought out. The second thing was leadership. There were other groups of centres around us that were not regularly meeting with their leaders. And I wondered why that was, because I know in my role as principal, I got a lot of value about sitting down with other principals and saying, hey, what's your thoughts on this? So we developed the Leadership Council. and we committed to weekly meetings, and they're not all doom and gloom. Hey, you need this number and things like that. In fact, they're very leadership focused in terms of driving growth. We've used the work of, actually I've got some of the books here, but we've used the work of like John Maxwell, which is the 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership. And we've used Robertson's book on Respect Trumps Harmony, and, all those classics, Fish, and all those, we've dug into those sorts of elements and continually built that out. And that has been a major influence, because weekly we meet with our leaders and we talk through the stuff that's challenging them, and that's what's their blind spot. So those are two facets that we really pulled out from the Blue Ocean that have really catapulted us forward.
So that Blue Ocean approach that you've taken, and effectively what would be a red ocean. I mean, we see that so much with most businesses. You could probably look at trades or owner-operators as being really guilty of this, where they do enough to get some work and then they lose that momentum because they have to execute the work, and then they pick it up again and then they drop it, so on. How much opportunity did you think your competitors were losing by not following that approach that you took?
Well, we got told that everyone had massive wait lists. That's what we got told. So we were like, right, well, let's test it. Let's keep building and see if these massive wait lists disappear. Right? We were being told 18 months. That's what we got told. So we're like, right, let's just keep building. Let's figure that out. And I think we've probably tapped that now. I think we're at that point where, well, we've still got a lot of housing to come online, though. Papamoa's got a ton of housing to come online in the next kind of 6 to 8 years. So we're actually not that worried. But so that was the first thing. But everyone told us there were wait lists. We were like, okay, well, we'll just keep building. Let's test that out. And yeah, we just kept filling centres and go again. The other facet, we also built our podcast ourselves, and I think we're close to 200 episodes now. But for us, two things. The media always bashed early learning. You would never find an NZ Herald article that was saying the great things about the great operators and all the cool things that we're doing for kids. It was always about the child that escaped or the terrible stuff. And don't get me wrong, there is some terrible stuff, but on a daily basis, there are teachers and centres changing lives for families and kids. And we thought, well, let's just build our own podcast and take the narrative back. Let's really start to open up that channel, that alleyway, and start to talk through what it is we experience in leadership and business and community building, developing our teaching team, what it looks like on building great experiences for kids and families. And we just took back the narrative and it allowed us to hold space for all the great things that are going on. The other part to that was we were competing with some pretty cool centres in Papamoa, and we thought, well, how do we get in front of all the best people if we can't get in front of them? Well, the podcast is the natural way, because we were putting myself on camera and talking to our leaders and my wife and our other leaders and getting those people out in front of people on a medium which was really growing. It was another way for us to compete in a space without having to physically be in front of those great people. So, and you'd be amazed at how many people will be like, oh, I saw Ray on the podcast, or you talked about this, or yeah, I understand, or the alignment's there with what Ray's saying and what I see on your guys' social media, or da. So it's just those sorts of elements that really drove, again, some of that kind of blue ocean thinking and allowed us to really take control of the narrative.
Just want to touch on one thing there, Ray, and this is your story around growth, from 0 to 6 centres, which is pretty impressive. The work that I do working around SMBs, and we've got 2 clients now that are recent award-winning businesses because of their growth factors, and they've done some amazing things, absolutely, and they're doing some smart things. One of the things I've always challenged is growing and scaling sustainably, because you can grow for growth's sake. And what we're finding is that when you just you don't have to lift up the bonnet very far to see the steam just coming out, because it's wrapped up in the owners or a very small percentage of the leadership. They're about to pop. The gasket is about to blow, yet award-winning, on the surface, good, growth. But how about doing it sustainably. You can grow fast, but sustainably.
Well, Rob, that's part of the reason why we had opportunity in Hamilton and Te Kaupara. And Courtney and I just made a choice. We were like, nah, look, let's just stay here. Let's stay in PAP. Let's do a decade in Papamoa. Now, and I know that sounds long, but actually in the scheme of things, if it allows us to go boom, boom, like that after a decade, I don't think it matters. So we wanted to know and understand who we were through iterations of growth. We made some mistakes early on. People felt like we forgot about them or we're growing too fast. That was some of the feedback we took on board. Our kind of amalgamation of another group, like when we had an acquisition, bringing them in, it was a bit rocky, so we had to learn about that. And so there's all those sorts of kind of micro lessons that could be applied in a macro that we really started to dig into. And I think the important factors around growth and Howard Schultz's book, Pour Your Heart Into It. I've read that quite a few times, but one thing always stands out to me is he's like, how do you stay big? How do you get big and stay small? And yeah, when I really ruminate on that sort of quote, I think to myself, what are the things that we can scale aggressively? It is the IP of how we make people feel when they walk through our doors. It is the ability to create environments that allow our people to succeed or can create the conditions to win. We can scale our leadership capability and impact. We can scale, one thing that's really important to us is our Māori Pacifica programs and how we've really delivered that with a deep level of authenticity. And a lot of those things I'm talking to don't really cost a lot of money. They really are needle movers in terms of culture and, efficiencies across a group as big as what we've become in the last 6 years. So the interesting thing with ECE is that you build a centre, you fill it, and generally you don't have to worry too much further about that. Once you've built a good name, generally you stay pretty full, unless something terrible, tragic happens, touch wood. So that puts a lot of complacency in people, whereas we've decided to really push the boundaries on a few things, like our leadership council, like the podcast, like our marketing, like our excursions, like our Māori Pacifica programs and tech as well now. And it's just enabled almost organic growth in so many different ways without actually physical massive growth across. We got approached by some people about scaling up. Yeah, they had rolled up centres before, and they're awesome people, great people. But it was cool for Courtney and I to walk away from it, knowing that we're not there yet, knowing that we didn't get enticed by the money, and just because we knew, we've got a lot more work to do in this space. So yeah, that's a good example of us being able to put the foot on the brakes, on the right brake in some aspects, and actually put the foot on the accelerator and other things.
I know you've got a bit of a philosophy behind leadership, and you've mentioned a few names already, but you're out there trying to exceed the expectations of your people. And I see that you're doing that deliberately so then they can exceed expectations for others. Tell us a bit about what that looks like for you.
Well, the first thing is we've worked really hard to remove our DNA from the business. I think that's important to understand, and that meaning that we didn't want the owners/founders to be the bottleneck of growth and sustainable growth, like Rob's talking about. So that means that a lot of the decision-making abilities that I hold today are null and void. I always talk about the fact is I got fired from the hiring and I got hired for the firing when I've had to let people go with some 90-day trial stuff or something like that. But I lost my job in the hiring because I believed I could turn everyone into a great teacher. And then people would ring me and be like, hey man, who hired this person? But I've removed a lot of my own energies from spaces so that Future Focus itself has its own kind of mundane energy without being built around its founder, one of its founders, or both Courtney and I. And that's been a phenomenal move for us, which still allows us. We're still navigating that kind of blurred line of when I do turn up, can I ask Ray for this or resources or something like that, or some of those leadership decisions that might get made by talking to me. But ultimately, I've learned to just be like, oh, look, cool, glad you brought it up, talk to Ash and we can have a yarn about those sorts of things. So ultimately, the people on the front line, we want them to be as empowered as possible to make great decisions for their people, and also make poor decisions and learn from it, and frame it up in a way that they can take lessons. The only way to do that, and I know this is weird, but I kind of just say to them, hey man, like don't kill a teacher, don't kill a kid, and let's work back from there. I know that's real kind of in your face, but start there and then let's work back from there. You can make those sorts of situations in terms of your leaders actually making decisions, getting things wrong, understanding the lessons, framing it up in a way that allows them to take the lesson and apply and become a better leader. Yeah, then that's job done, right?
What you're saying aligns really nicely with the philosophy of leadership with lean thinking, and and it's very much drawn out of that Japanese culture of respective people as well, which is amazing. I'm loving it. But for our listeners out there and typical SMB owners, and this is kind of what I'm trying to do as a business, is you said a statement there: remove your DNA out of the business. Now, I'm going to drill into some specifics here, because that could be just one of those little, that was a curious statement, but I actually want to test you respectfully. Give me a couple of examples of what did you do to get you out of the business? Because I absolutely agree. Appreciating that means the operational side of the business.
Yes. So the first thing you do is you dumb yourself out of jobs, right? I learned this as a kid. You just do the dishes really poorly and you don't get asked to do the dishes again. Your sister just comes back round, or there's I really didn't put a lot of energy into understanding some of the student management software or the enrollments phase. I had a general understanding, but as we grew, I just pulled myself right away from it, to the point where the team don't even ask me because they know that I don't have any idea or clue about it, and for good reason. The harder one was my presence, because I was the owner, and one of the owners. People thought if I was turning up for a conversation, they'd stop what they were doing and be like, oh, Ray wants to talk. Because I'm always kind of scheming or talking about things and being excited about things, I didn't realize I was a hindrance in that sense. And it wasn't until people had their voice and were like, hey, Ray, are you here to talk? Okay, cool. Can you give me half an hour, or could you come back at? Because I realized I'd steal an hour of people's time. And here was me saying, hey, keep that balance, look after yourself, go back to your families. But then here's me stealing an hour and a half of people's time, and then they've got to do the work, because no one's going to do their leadership work at night, including me. That was a very key insight, and thankfully I have enough awareness to recognize that and not carry that sort of habit on. So now I kind of text ahead or ring ahead, hey, have you got 10 minutes anytime soon? Oh, no, yes. Okay, cool. I'll come and see you at that time, and go from there. I think the other factor around when you talk about removing DNA is the creation of programs or initiatives throughout the business that are driven entirely by me. That's an important, there were things that were driven entirely by me. So that meant, Jim Collins talks about that level 4 leader, the leader with 1,000 minions. And I started to realize in sorts of elements too that I held a lot of, held the talking stick too much. So yeah, it's been a big part of that is stepping out of those spaces where my voice isn't actually necessary anymore to lead a great leadership meeting or lead a great leadership program or whatever it is we're doing. Some of those things have been hard though, Rob. I like contributing. I love our people. I love the product. I love what we do. But if we really are committed to Ash and her growth, yeah, I just got to continue to shut up a bit more.
I think that goes back to one of those earlier episodes. Dave Bunting comes to mind. It's not sexy and it's bloody hard to do the basics. And some of the basics is empower your staff and step right out.
Yes. And knowing what empowering looks like in terms of understanding. Again, for example, me turning up to have Courtney was generally because I had some ideas. So it was just that ability to incite kind of, yeah, let's go, let's do that, but move away from core work, and then people getting snowed under because I've come and turned up with the next big ECE event that we should be doing. So yeah, I'm grateful that I have the awareness to nip that in the bud quick. Yeah.
So you've talked about the team a little bit. Tell us about the importance of having that strong team around you, marketing, back office, the teachers on the ground, a CEO, and what's the impact of that on operational excellence?
Well, I always talk to other business owners about how long could you go away from your business before it fell apart? I actually believe we could walk away today and it would just keep humming. There's enough evidence there knowing that we've got strong HR, we've got really strong storytelling. Our leadership council is thriving. There's always issues, but still thriving in what they need to do. We've got really strong focus on what we need to focus on, being increasing value and minimizing turnover, creating those environments to help people win. So I'm pretty certain Courtney and I could go away for a holiday for a year, certainly, and we'd come back and probably be doing extremely well. So I think that's a good insight, because I know when we started, it was hard to even take an hour away. You're constantly talking about it and trying to get going, especially after I'd had a couple of what I perceived as, at the time, failed businesses. I didn't quite frame up the lessons out of it at that time. So I think that's a really important factor to it. But also, though, the mistakes thing is really important. Like, we've got to make mistakes. We've got to burn some money here. We've got to kind of try things, and if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. But also, in that sense, when we sense it is going really well, we follow through and finish. And those are key factors. I think the other factor is that a lot of business owners that I meet with, they lose sight of being creative, that they probably started that business to solve a problem or to kind of alleviate an experience that they had, and then they lost sight of that. And as they've moved away from the coal face, they just haven't had a chance to get back down and get into the nitty gritty and be creative about what it is we can do to further serve our communities and our people.
Having those people supporting you has created the thing that I just absolutely love about what you guys are doing. The fact that, and I'll butcher your words for your vision, but you have a vision of getting children into the appropriate lane for them to do their best, ultimately, that I see. And you're doing that with Future Focus, growing 1 to 6 centres and so forth. But ultimately, that's a brick and mortar business. If you want to get more children in, you grow, you add another centre. So if you want to have 1,000 children, that's 12 centres or whatever the numbers are. But through the day-to-day and getting out of the business, you've managed to spot something really cool. And off the back of that, ultimately, I'd call that quite an innovation. And that's leading to a scalable product that you're now taking international. Tell us about Auro and the genesis of how that came about, because this is cool.
Yeah, so thank you, because Auro, as a product, has been a wild ride. So the basic theme of it, last year we had a hypothesis. Well, we got told by the ministry that 1 in 5 children need learning support, behaviour support, neurodiversity support, or trauma and anxiety support. 1 in 5. And of course, the 1 in 5 is over a long period of time, because you don't solve those things often, like neurodiversity. It is what it is for life. That is what it is. So we recognized that we were starting to see the signs of a lot of that stuff: violence, behavior, aggression, trauma, anxiety, neurodiverse needs, from very young. And the signs were pretty clear. In early learning and education, we can say it looks like a fire, kind of sounds like a fire, smells like a fire, but we can't say it's a fire. So what we actually did is we actually went out, we had a hypothesis. We said, if we brought in an expert, meaning a psych in this instance, would we solve issues faster? And we remove the cost from parents, would we have greater efficiencies and outcomes for children? That was our kind of hypothesis. I brought in a mate of mine. He's spent 5 months with us. We basically gave him our 10 perceived toughest cases. And he worked with us pretty closely. It was very expensive, but he worked with us pretty closely. By the end of the 5 months, unequivocally, we proved that, yes, that was the case. We could, if we removed costs and sped things up, would we have greater outcomes? Absolutely. A couple of things really startled us. The first thing was a lot of what his work was doing was redirecting us back to our curriculums that I've spoken about that are global products anyway. They're built on best practice. They're built on clinical lenses and best practice. So what we actually managed to do out of those 10 cases, we actually managed to solve 8 of those internally. So we solved 80% of our perceived tough cases internally. The other 2 actually got the support that they needed, and we actually rushed them to diagnoses. So we managed to take a child who was having 10 months to wait to go and see a specialist who was clearly autistic. We actually got him to diagnoses in about 7 hours of work. So that was astounding, because in the Bay of Plenty alone, there's 80 new referrals a week. Wellington has a 4-year wait list. Some children are outgrowing the referral system in the early learning setting. They're outgrowing it in the primary setting, and that means they're reset into another thing. And by the time a child reaches that point, they're almost at the point of no return. So we realized that way of delivering was just too expensive. AI had turned up. We had been, myself personally, I'd been on a lot of deep dive about AI. I've been following it quite closely. I've always been a bit of an early adopter on things. I had the first iPhone as soon as I could get it, all those sorts of things. We decided, our business partner Russell Packer and I, we sat down and one Friday we just started talking about and spitballing and brainstorming, and we realized that there's so much raw data out there talking about children that we're not collating and creating value from. And that was teachers having conversations about kids. And we always used WhatsApp. So we're like, right, if teachers are speaking on WhatsApp, they're constantly talking about children and behavior and what they're doing to alleviate the behavior, things like that, for greater transparency. Can we ingest that information and create value out of it? So we went out, we found a developer who happened to be a parent. And we built Auro, the MVP. We kind of trialed it in February at one of our centres in one room. So we had basically had our agent who lives in the chat, and 4 times a day it ingests out all the information and it runs it through a filter of all of our beautiful curriculum documents, and then essentially it creates all the reporting needs necessary for us to either seek solutions or create opportunities for external support to come in. So we're now 6 months deep and we're ingesting 2,500 messages, and the value it's bringing is like gigantic. We've now got schools involved. We've got other learning centres, and we've actually signed up the Cook Islands government. We're just seeking some funding to roll out a trial over there, because I don't want the burden on them to be huge. But they're in principle agreed to come with us, and the value that we're generating and the speed is just unbelievable. What we can create now for supporting documentation for speech language therapists, for psychologists, for transition into school, transition into other centres, transition into rooms, trigger documents, support documents. It's mind-blowing. It's mind-blowing, and we're really proud of it. And we've been pretty aggressive with it too. We basically, Russell and I have said, look, we want the ministry to fund a pilot for us and then go from there. We've just kind of, instead of going for small groups of customers, we've just thought, right, let's sign up the ministry and go from there. So, yeah, the ministry are coming to visit with us, and, yeah, we've got psychs on board who just love it. Yeah, it's been a wild ride, bro. Wild.
It's freaking cool. That's what it is. I mean, like over another couple of beers, we've talked about where it could go. And I mean, the interesting thing, when I step back from it, what you're actually doing, and it is simple but not easy. And if you think about, I don't know if it was, I know Steve Jobs had this saying around simplicity is the ultimate sophistication, or something, words to that effect. But there's no extra effort required by teachers from what they're currently doing.
Exactly. And it's the thing, Dr. Benjamin Hardy and Dan Sullivan, they wrote this book, 10X is Easier Than 2X. It's such a great book. It actually really helped reframe a lot of mine and Russell's thinking around where we're going with this sort of thing. And one thing he says is you just can't scale complexity. And when you have a UI, a user interface or a user experience that's real clunky and doesn't do something real time, it's very hard for teachers to adapt and then implement. And we wanted to remove that friction. So, like I said, we've got 120 odd staff. That means we've got 120 people committing to discussions about children and their learning needs and support needs. And we can just scrape all the lessons out and across a group of us. For me personally, being the group owner, we can see themes and patterns, not only on behaviors, but also on now we're starting to see things like how teachers are actually feeling, what the kind of environment and culture of the message group is indicating, that there are teachers feeling stressed about not enough support or blah 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 blah, and in that sense it gives us greater scope. So at an individual level you got scope, at a group level you got scope. We look at it, we deal with key groups of people like MOH, MOE, Oranga Tamariki, MSD, obviously the police. There's all those sorts of things that we can now start to scrape information without, we can redact all the individual names, but so they just need group themes and patterns. And now we can start being actually proactive about what's going on. We can start to drill down and ask questions like, how come Papamoa East has had a 37% reduction in violent tendencies from 4-year-old boys in the last year? What are they doing there? What's going on? What can we drill into there? What can we dig into there? We've seen a spike in anxiety in this group between 3-year-old girls. What's going on there? Actually be really proactive about it and looking at what solutions are actually working for teachers so that they're not getting burnt out. Because I can tell you right now, what we can give people more money. That's nice, but it doesn't last. If we don't create the better environments for them to really do well and thrive, and behavior is a major impact on that, because behavior not only impacts the teacher and what they're dealing with, it impacts the little community. It's dealing with parents, it's external agencies, all those sorts of things. That's what burns teachers out, because they feel like they don't have the solutions at hand. And now with Auro, it's right in the palm of their hand. They can literally ask, can you please help with such little Ray's behaviors? And it just prints it all out. Boom. This is what, because of the recorded messages, this is what we're seeing. This is what it's doing. This is what we recommend. And having people like Ministry Psych say to us, oh my God, like we need this. We need this, is like being super validating for Russ and I.
When we met that first time, you talked about the central stakeholder in the ECE environment being the teacher.
Yeah.
And the fact that, I don't remember the exact numbers and you'll know them off the top of your head, but they're investing whatever it is for a career in the space. It takes them however many years to learn to operate in the space, and they only stay in the environment for, I think you said 5 years.
5 years. Yep.
And the biggest factor in that was behavior, wasn't it? The behavior of the children and the impact of that, wasn't it?
And the community, it's dealing with parents that don't want to accept certain things. Autism's a hard one, fellas. It's a hard one, especially if it's a first child and people are like, remember, they don't quite realize that until they put their child in an atypical situation and start to realize some things are not quite measuring up. And Russell knows this quite intimately with his son. His boy couldn't talk until he was 6. And Russ talks to the factors that he had the resources to support his son, and his son's doing extremely well now. But if he didn't have the resources, he believes that his son wouldn't be where he is today. We know the resources are there because our curriculums are worldwide and revered. They are built off best practice. They are clinically endorsed as well around dealing with challenging behaviours and dealing with communication with whānau and things like that. And we've created a situation that allows teachers to rush to a decision and quickly cross it off. the major thing that leads to burnout is waiting. Okay, you've asked me to put this report in. I've done this report. I've done all my analysis. I've sent it through. I've done it for a month. Here's all my observations. And then we submit it to the shadow league of decision makers who take a behavior continuum and place kids on there, and they make some decisions. We don't know how they arrive at those decisions, but they arrive, and you're just sitting there waiting. And if we're getting 80 new referrals a week in the Bay of Plenty alone, you can only imagine how long they're going to wait. So that's part of the pressure, because you're still dealing with escalating behaviors. And if we can't address the escalating behaviors, a child at 4 who's aggressive will be extremely aggressive at 8, and probably won't have a consistent time in school. And ultimately, the burden on society down the line becomes greater and greater. I say this, every teacher will put their hand up if they had Richie McCaw or Simon Mannering in their class, but they wouldn't put their hand up if they had Kurariki Bailey or things, these kids that have gone on and unfortunately done terrible things. You can't tell me that they didn't recognize that those behaviors weren't presenting themselves when they were little. That is not accurate. We know that if that child was violent at 3 or 4, and if no one intervened, the path and the probability for success for that child every year just goes down. We know a 5-year-old's been suspended. One I know, a 5-year-old has just been suspended 11 days at school. Yeah, violent. He is violent, and actually I agree with it. But this is a pathway now. He's 11 days in. So what are we doing for these kids that will have big burdens on society if we're not intervening earlier and helping teachers actually create solutions for lifting the probability of success? And that's what Auro does.
So you've created a product that, well, firstly is going to help teachers in your centres be able to escalate behaviours so that children can get put, in my words, in the right lane to get the right support. Which means you're going to keep your staff longer than the industry average. And from what you've been talking about with the broader leadership culture that you have, those people are going to be able to grow into senior roles in your business or stay in the roles they're in if they're happy with that. What do you think small business owners in other industries can take away from the journey that you're on with Future Focus and potentially with Auro as well?
Good question. I think your customer's always going to tell you what you need to provide and what you should stop providing. If we don't provide opportunities to listen to our customer, we get into a lot of trouble. So, for example, Future Focus is kind of 65%. We've got 2 major customers that we see in early learning. The Ministry of Education, because they fund about 65% of our business, or 60%. So we can't upset them. And we've got to abide by their rules because as soon as they take their funding away, you're done. And the second customer is the teacher. It's actually quite easy to find, not easy, but it is far easier to find more parents. But if you build a crappy name in the education circles, it's very hard to recruit great people. And in that sense, recruit great leaders or build great leaders as well. So that when we decide on who the customer is, which is for us, like I just said there, which is weird, people will be like, oh, it's the parents and the kids. Yes, certainly they're a byproduct of keeping ministries happy and keeping teachers fulfilled and happy and purpose driven. Coming back around to what you're saying is like, how often do your frontline people have access to you to be creative, to suggest ideas, to talk to you about what's not going so well and what you should be trying? And there's enough evidence out there. Yeah, I'm reading Andy Grove's book at the moment, Only the Paranoid Survive, but Sam Walton's book, Made in America, he was very, very focused on the frontline teams. He was always in his plane flying about, wanting to talk to all his frontline team. And those are great examples of large businesses going out and staying right at the forefront so that they know what inflections are coming or what we're doing that's not suiting the people we're serving. And ultimately, we can make decisions faster and more efficiently.
Nice. So you've got a dream principle.
Yeah.
And you use that to filter decisions through your vision. Tell us about that.
Yeah, I think it starts. My first real financial dream was being able to fill up my car without having to check my bank account. I It's because I watched my parents fight about money my whole life, and that had quite an effect on me. I don't think we were poor. We always had kai, but there was a very broke mentality around no window of abundance that we can look through. So my first real financial goal was, yeah, I can fill up my car without worrying. And that was built on because I used to go back. Cortez's mother and I weren't together at all, really. So when I was studying in Hamilton, I'd either hitch back to go and see him, or I would have a car, and I was really fortunate. Like my housemaster at St. Paul's would let me bring him up and stay with me and things like that. And when you're really that broke around things and where you can't provide what you perceive as being important for a child, Christmas or birthdays, and trying to get them all those things, it starts to weigh on you. So interestingly, my first goal was about filling up my car without having to worry about my bank account. I remember achieving that got my principal's role, and then it just disappeared. And I remember being at the petrol pump going, I haven't dreamed big enough here. I've achieved it. And I just remember saying to myself, like, oh man, yeah, I've really missed the trick here. Or like, I haven't dreamt big enough. In today's world, where I carry this notion of what is it that we want to do? Can we do it is a different thing, but what do we want to do? Right? We want to deburden teachers so they can do what they signed up to do, which is work with children. What does that look like as a dream? Well, that looks like great leaders potentially, but also when we really drill down and look at what inhibits that purposeful and that success space for teachers, it's actually a lot of the stuff off the ball. it's the crappy stuff that they've got to deal with. And so when I dream of environments like that, and we think of what Auro is providing, that accuracy, that the burdening of the expectation on providing all this crap that they have to generate in their own times anyway, that sounds very foreign, because every job, especially education, has got big paper demands. But crazily, when we've dreamt about what that environment looks like and we've been able to create it, our fears have just disappeared. Almost now we're just thinking like, what does this look like? Or talk back to you, will it prompt you doing this? Can we do this? Can we, like, so much now we're just writing all these ideas down on the whiteboard and being like, yeah, let's do this, because we're just like, well, we've built this now. And yeah, I think it's just been about removing a lot of that fear and what is possible in what I see as probably the most exciting time in human history.
Absolutely. There's plenty that's going to go from here. Now, Rob's got a few quick fire questions that he's going to run you through. So I'm going to hand over to Rob.
Absolutely. And to be fair, one of them was going to be, what's your favourite book for SMB owners to pick up? But after hearing about 26 of them mentioned over the last hour, including two of my favourites, I must include, so I was quite happy with that. I'll just let listeners go back and listen again, because there
Can I recommend one more? Can I recommend one more?
Okay, go one more.
Great Kiwi one. It's called Every Bastard Says No, and it is Jeff Ross, the 42 Below creator. It is a great book. It is about, if there's anything about Kiwi ingenuity, that is the book. It is unbelievable.
Brilliant. The one of my favourites that you did mention, and we won't go into it too much because this is quick fire. Fish.
Yeah.
Love it.
Yeah, great book. Great book.
Excellent. All right. Here is some quick fire. So they are quick fire. What is the one habit that has had the biggest impact on your success?
Journaling. I carry my journals everywhere. I write in them daily. Sometimes I just write a heading. Sometimes I read something and write my reflections in it. Sometimes I draw. But carrying journals everywhere is important, and also that'll be a taonga that I'll pass on to my kids. They can't read my writing, but they'll have some sort of tech that'll read it all then. But yeah, journaling. And swimming in the ocean. I swim in the ocean daily.
The best advice you've ever been given?
Ooh, that is a good one. I think, that's a good one. I think about the people too that gave that advice. I'm just thinking about the people that really... I think one thing that really stands out to me that I was told by a principal a long time ago, and he said, To whom much is given, much is required. And, I grew up not with a lot of stuff, but I had a great childhood. I had some really crazy things happen in my childhood too. But a lot of what I did when I was little still resonates today, in the fact that I want to create environments and platforms for people to launch from as well. So I've been given lots of energy from great people, Mr. Henry Smith, Mr. Wilson, Mrs. Vidal, Courtney, my wife, obviously, my in-laws. So I take that as a responsibility for me to continue to serve and create those situations for others.
Excellent. Right. Now, last one, very important. The best cafe in Papamoa.
Gather Cafe. Yeah, Gather Cafe. You'll find me there every day pretty much, weekdays, Monday to Friday. Yeah, Vaughan and Selena are amazing operators. You'll find me there just either reading or working away. I'm generally the guy always in Warriors gear, no matter what the result. But no, Gather Cafe is where it's at.
Excellent. All right.
So Ray, thank you. Thank you for sharing about how you've got here and what's ahead. What I love is that you've shared about your challenges, and instead of calling them failures and being buried by them, they're instead lessons you've learned from, and now you're standing on top of them. Ultimately, those have allowed you to learn, adapt, and grow. For me, it proves something Rob and I talk about often. Persistence and building a high-performing business is about leading in a way that lifts everyone around you. By starting with a clear vision, building leadership at every level, and keeping things simple enough to scale, you and Courtney have created something that's not just successful in Papamoa, but it's opening doors nationally and internationally. It's a reminder for any SMB owner listening, whether you're in early learning or engineering, that your business can be a hub of excellence if you align purpose, people, and process. When you combine that with the courage to dream big, you can create impact far beyond your postcode. Have a think about Ray's measure of excellence. What would happen if you walked away from your business for a 12-month break? What do you think you'd come back to? And to our listeners, if this has sparked ideas for you and your business, take some time and create a vision for the impact you want to have in this world. Until next time, keep building better SMBs.